Welcome to the Fortress of Nerditude podcast, a safe place to talk about all things in nerd and pop culture. I'm Spencer Stapleton, and my co-pilot, as always, is Steve Madura.
Hey, guys.
We're two best friends that, despite being fathers and husbands, we just refuse to grow up. We release every Thursday morning on iTunes and Google Music. Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 24.
Hey, guys. How is everyone this fine evening?
You know, Steve, as we go along now and the numbers start getting higher and higher, I'm going to have like a harder time trying to relate, like, you know, last week, episode 23, Michael Jordan. This one's like 24. I'm like, if you add them together, they make 6. I don't know.
We'll just have to let it lie. Just,
I got to find something, man. Anyway, I don't know why, but there's going to come a point where I'm going to have nothing like episode 321. That's part of a Fibonacci sequence, maybe?
Right.
Oh, reverse Fibonacci? Anyway.
Round to the nearest decimal point, carry the 1, and there you go.
Yeah, so anyway, episode number 24, Steve. We've been doing this for 24 straight weeks. Once again, my friend, I love spending time with you. I'm happy to be back here with you and to see your smiling face and to hear those golden dulcet tones.
Well, I do what I can. Good to be back, and I'm ready for a great show. I think I had a lot of fun last week. It was good to talk and have Brita on and talk about our movie club. I hope that everyone's had a chance to listen to that. If you haven't seen
Hidden Figures.
Yeah. There really aren't any spoiler alerts per se. It's not really a spoiler type movie. You know, Darth Vader is Luke's father. There's nothing like that. So, the Titanic sinks. Nothing like that.
What?
Say what? Yeah. So fear not. Listen away. Plug in the earbuds and enjoy. So, but good to be with you guys again. And I'm ready to get to it.
So, Steve, how was your week, man? What's new?
What is new? So one thing that I wanted to talk about. So my son my oldest son is a little entrepreneur, and he has hired himself out is he trying to sell cars on eBay again? Exactly right. No. So he is, I think I've talked about this before, done market research studies for the likes of Kraft and like Lunchables and Capri Sun and others. Yeah. And he's made like $1,000, and he's like 10. And so they pay him like a few $100.
Did he just turn 11 like a week ago?
He did. So now Daddy takes a little bit more off the top. I'm like his Don King. I'm like, I drive you to these freaking things. There's the gas, insurance. I mean, who knows the wear and tear on the car? He's like, 30%'s a little steep, Dad. This is how Macaulay Culkin and Gary Coleman really happen.
Finder's fee, son. It's a finder's fee.
Exactly. I'd be a horrible Hollywood parent. And so he's been doing this, and he's been saving up and all the rest, but not really with like a goal in mind per se, besides just to like throw 20s down in his bed and roll around and be like, I'm rich! Scrooge McDuck style.
Nice.
And so he finally found the apple of his eye. There's a hobby shop in Northbrook, Illinois called Hobbytown USA. Shout out to my boys over there. And he has been wanting to buy a remote control car. The brand is called Traxxas. And it is basically like a very high-end remote control car. The thing costs $250.
Woo!
It can go 35 miles an hour. And, of course, my son sees all of these YouTubers and whatnot doing like flips and dips and all the rest on like skate parks and all this stuff. I'm like, son, they've been doing it a while, so just slow down. And
maybe
maybe
break him in with like a $90 model, so when he like busts that up really good, it's not the $200 model.
They don't like make, they have like, you have like the crap stuff at Walmart that breaks anyway. And then you have like the really expensive, there's nothing in between. There's not like $150. And so anyway, I buckled, and it's his money anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And he's saving some other stuff, for more important things. So I let him get this thing. We rode around on Saturday. We rode his bike all around. He had to do his thank you notes first from his birthday, because his birthday was just last month, before he could get this. So we went, we got it. This thing is probably about 2 feet long and about 1 foot wide. I mean, it's big.
Wow.
And thankfully, it has a training mode that it only goes 15 miles an hour. And I said, son, you're going to do the training mode until you can handle it, right? And sure enough, we take it to his elementary school, and he's driving this thing around like a pro. He drives it up onto the jungle gym because it has like a ramp that goes up to it. So it drives up, whittles his way all through, goes across a monkey bridge, and then he drives this thing down the slide and like launches it off the end of the slide into the wood chips, and it just keeps going. I'm like, this thing is freaking awesome, and I want one. So maybe I have to take a loan
Carrie
out
to
from
spend $200. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but it's like waterproof, so it can go in like mud and all the rest, and it's all the parts are encased, and it's a pretty sweet rig, man. So
wow.
So yeah, so that's been kind of a fun thing.
You'll have to have Carter send me some of those YouTube links. I'd like to check it out.
Oh yeah, it's pretty sweet. Speaking of YouTube links, Potter Pals. Yes,
have seen Potter Pals. I did watch about like probably 8 or 10 of those videos, just so you know. And I thought they were funny. I enjoyed them. Some were funnier than others. Like Wizard Swears was a little off-putting. Especially like right at the end where it's like beep 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 Newt of I beep beep beep, and I mean that had me laughing just because the whole idea of like
baby.
Yeah, like you only hear random words that aren't beeped out, and I mean obviously we know like people are doing this for kids, so like they're not really swearing, but
right.
They were pretty funny. The whole one where Harry wants Ginny to get a bob cut, and then realizes that Ginny, and I laughed pretty hard at that. I must say. So
Ginny and Ron look exactly the same, and he's like,
"Yes,
dang it!"
Yes, I have seen it. I watched probably like 8 or 10 of them. Brita and I watched them one night on my phone, and lying in bed, and just kind of laughed and giggled. And some of them were funnier than others. Some weren't. But if I was watching this in like 2007. Like 10 years ago when like they originally were hitting YouTube.
It'd have been the greatest thing since sliced bread.
They would have been a lot funnier because it would have been like more timely when the movies were out and the books were still big. So yes, right. Anyway, proceed. But I have seen Potter Pals. I told you I would. I came through.
Good man. The other thing that is just not a big like week thing, but my wife and I have been slowly trying to get through some movies that have kind of been in our queue for a while. And so this last week we watched... We didn't watch this last week. I guess it was 2 weeks ago we watched La La Land. And then this week we watched Lion. And then these are guilty pleasures of mine, but Keeping Up with the Joneses and Masterminds, which are both Zach Galifianakis films. And
okay.
So I really liked Lion. I thought it was a really good flick, and I always love, as we talked about with Hidden Figures, those movies that are actually based on true events, and that obviously is. It was a touching film. Anybody who's a parent can relate. And then I really liked La La Land. Actually, my wife didn't like it so much, but I loved like the grandeur of like old time Hollywood and musicals, and the opening scene that's like a one take. I don't think it's one take, but they say it's one take. It's pretty spectacular. So. Yeah, that was my week. How was your week?
My week. Where to begin? So let's start with the positive things. I saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Loved it. Freaking loved it. I'm not going to talk about it other than to say I freaking loved it. Go see that movie. Go see it in theaters. Don't wait for it to come out on DVD or go to Netflix or iTunes or whatever. That's definitely a see in the movie theater type of movie. Totally worth the time.
Yeah, definitely. How was the soundtrack really quick?
Soundtrack's good. You're going to like the soundtrack. If you like the first soundtrack, you're going to like this one.
Awesome.
Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to talk about any more than that because we are going to do our movie club on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 later at the end of this month. So we will get there, but I don't want to spoil anything. I mean, it's been out for a handful of days. It's going to take people a while to get there. So anyway, really good, really awesome. Definitely worth going and seeing. Now,
cool.
What else? So we've been watching The Flash. And I think I was talking to you about this earlier this week. We were looking for a new show. Typically, Brita and I try to watch a single show together. Like while I may be watching, a few shows on my own or some movies that I'm interested in on my own, and she has some of hers, we try to watch something together. It's like at the end of the night, after the kids are in bed and like, we've done cleaning or, whatever chores that need to be done or prep for the next day or whatever. And we've talked and kind of, gone through whatever we need to go through and had conversations, whatever. Typically we'll turn on something and just kind of like veg out for like the last, half hour or 45 minutes or so before we go to bed. And we picked The Flash and we're watching that on Netflix, the first season. And I think we're about halfway through the first season. Really enjoying it. Like I'm really enjoying it. It's really good. It kind of reminds me of Smallville in a way.
Really?
It kind of has that feeling of like we're telling stories that are kind of happening to this character. But it has a feeling of like not, I don't know, at least this is the first season. Like it hasn't gotten like super, super heavy into like a lot of like the big overarching, like villains and, stuff. And there's a lot of just kind of like monster of the week type of feel. And Smallville did that for the first few seasons. And maybe that's why I'm making the comparison.
Yeah, I think with that show, because I actually watched it with Carrie, we probably made it 5 episodes in. It felt very light to me. It felt very predictable, I'd even say. And it was kind of like I liken it to Arrow. I watched Arrow for probably the first season maybe, and it started to get to each week there was a new something that was threatening the city or whatever else, and I know to the point in Flash that I think I got, it was still kind of a mysterious thing. Like they always had those scenes where somebody had an ulterior motive and they seemed like a good guy, but were they really a bad guy? But it kind of left you with a kind of mystery about him, So
I think in TV shows like that though, Steve, they have to like build to somewhere. And so they got to like find a way to kind of catch you in the beginning, with like, here's a big threat to the city and how's he going to save it? And, how's he going to figure that out? But then they can start building the stories and, developing on the characters more and expanding out the mythos and the overall arcs. And we're kind of getting into that point now in the first season. I talked to people that have watched all the seasons and it's currently still on TV. And I know a lot of people that watch this like are super in love with the show. And I can see how, because it's really starting to get its hooks into us now. And it really probably has for probably a good 3, 4, 5 episodes. But I'm just now becoming more aware of like, hey, I want to, get done with all of our stuff so we can watch that.
Yeah, it's a good show. I liked it.
Yeah. So doing that, I'm still watching Arrested Development in between stuff. I'm kind of going back and rewatching that because I just love that show and it makes me laugh so hard.
Yeah.
Now, so that's kind of some of the good stuff that happened this week. Now let's talk about the not so good stuff. So if you listened to last week, you may have noticed that I sounded a little different. And you may be thinking to yourself right now, he sounds a little different right now. Well, that's because I'm sick. Last week, I got a cold like 2 days before we recorded. And a day before we recorded, I got the flu on top of the cold. And I'm not going to go into details, but it was horrid and miserable.
Thank you.
Yes, I will spare you. But it was one of those things where, it was ugly all around. And it was on top of a cold. And so I haven't been feeling well. And I recorded when we recorded last week, I was still sweating and I had a fever and it was just miserable. Now, I stayed home. I missed some work. I was really sick. Then I starting to feel a little bit better and bang, Charlie gets sick. Thankfully, Charlie's now 4 and he understands the concept of when I get sick, I go into the bathroom and take care of my illness in the toilet. That was a miracle upon miracles in a moment of horrendous, ugliness. Because I'm a sympathetic vomiter, and I have a high gag reflex, and I had to stay home with Charlie, and he's in there praying to the porcelain gods, and he's crying at the same time, Daddy, stay in here. And I'm trying to sneak out because Jackson's also home. And so here I am standing behind him with my fingers in my ears, with my ears plugged, trying to hum to myself. And he's like, no, Daddy, be quiet. I'm like, no, buddy, I can't do that because I don't want to vomit all over you while you're vomiting into the toilet. And
A sympathetic vomiter. Wow, I've never heard that phraseology before.
Let me tell you something.
You should put that on your plaque at work.
When I die, my tombstone's going to be like, husband, father, sympathetic vomiter. Because, I can't be around people doing that and making that noise. It just, it's bad. I've got to get out of there. Otherwise, I'm going to be joining the party. And so that was Charlie. He got sick 2 days after me. And then 2 days after Charlie, Jackson gets sick. And Jackson's 3. Jackson's a squirmy little boy. He was filling up a water balloon and not tying it off, and then you just kind of let it go, and the water just kind of squirts out everywhere. That was Jackson. I think we washed every single towel in our household, all of our blankets, all of his blankets. We had to clean carpets. I mean, it was just, I love that little boy. I love that little boy with all of my heart, but when he is sick, he just doesn't understand, and he squirms and he fights it, and it was miserable. And so I said to Brita, I said, hey, I really hope you don't get sick, but if everything falls in line, 2 days from now, you're going to be sick. Well, she was homesick today, and she's got that same 24-hour flu bug that we've all had. So
the blessings of children.
Yes, we've all been sick. It's been almost a week and a half in our household that we've had someone feeling like they want to die. And then on top of that, I still have this cold, and it's gotten into my chest now where I try to breathe deeply, and my chest starts doing these cavitations like I'm a submarine underwater that's decided to reverse the screws and back up, and it's cavitating and making that big that big, it just it starts everything starts rattling, and that's my chest, everything starts rattling, and I'm trying to hold it in, and then I just go through this horrible dry coughing spell where I think I'm going to cough up a lung, but nothing comes up. And my wife just looks at me with this look what are you doing? Are you dying? You're waking up the kids. You got to stop that. And it's I have no control at this moment. So if I sound weird, or if I go into some sort of massive coughing fit, I promise you I'm not trying to die. My body's just trying to betray me and kill me in the middle of this podcast. That's what it is.
There you go. It wants the royalties. Well, we are glad you are still with us, and you have made the Herculean effort to fight against the man and the bubonic plague that has so riddled your home, and hope that you don't get it again.
I'll tell you what, though, the one nice thing about when you're sick like this is when the guy comes to your door to sell you on aerating your lawn, and you say, hey, don't come any closer. We're all sick here. Just give me your business card. I'll take a look at it, and I'll let you know. You're not actually lying at that point. You're actually being completely honest. Listen, we've got the plague in this household. If you want to sell me on $25 to aerate my lawn and you want to catch the plague, by all means, buddy, that's your choice, right?
That's so funny because that guy called me today and I wanted spring cleaning on my lawn, and I'm like, do you do aeration? He's like, I don't understand aeration. I'm like, aeration, do you go in the little plugs? Do you pull the plugs out of the ground and all the rest with the little dirt and the aerator? Didn't understand. And he owns a landscaping company. I couldn't communicate apparently what I wanted. So you send that aerator guy over to my house.
Done. But he's going to be coming with the plague, just so you know.
Cheerio. Well, very cool. Well, we are glad that, like I said, you're with us, and hopefully, for a few minutes more, hold out until the end of the podcast.
I'll do my best. I promise.
Good. Well, good. I'm glad that at least it seems to be on the downward slope, and I hope that fiber optics are not so sophisticated now that I could catch something through this microphone. So
I doubt it.
Good. So with that, if you don't have anything else, do you want to hit the favorite part of your show and mine?
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
I always have to let you know, many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Rest in peace, you Bothans.
Okay, Steve, so Rebel Intelligence is upon us. We talked about this a little bit last week off the podcast, and then, of course, we joined in wishing everyone a happy May the Force be with you Star Wars Day.
Right.
You know, I love this because like growing up, I always saw May the 4th and I was like, it's May the Force be with you. And like, I kind of got that, but like, I'm glad like the internet makes that a thing now. Like that's a thing people do.
Wait, but you weren't Al Goring just now and saying like, I came up with this.
No.
Okay,
but I'm saying we lived in an age when we were like in high school that was, you know, in junior high, like really pre-internet. I mean, like AOL was there and there were some chat rooms, but it wasn't like the internet like it is today.
I was getting discs on Cheerio boxes.
That's right. I got my 10 hours of AOL coming.
That's right.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like I remember like talking about this kind of stuff and like nerdy stuff like this you would talk about, but like it would be in close groups and with friends and like maybe you like, you know, groups and, you know, in the high school or the colleges would, you know, talk about this kind of stuff. Little enclaves of nerds may have talked about it, but like now, like it's everywhere. I mean, you've got gosh, major companies jumping on board and, you know, wishing everyone, you know, may the force be with you day and whatnot. So
it kind of reminds me of the old joke that, you know, what is a dentist's favorite time of day?
I don't know, Steve. What is a dentist's favorite type of day? Time of day.
Time of day? 2:30. 2:30. You see what I did there?
Wow.
Yeah.
We're fathers.
Right. It's gone from Chappelle humor to this.
Right. So that happens on May the 4th. And then every first Saturday in May every year is Free Comic Book Day. And so pretty much every comic book store participates in this. And sometimes they've got like, you know, bigger titles. Sometimes there's kind of small independent titles. But typically they give away a free comic book to everyone that comes into the store. Up until like a certain amount, you know, quantities may last as the supplies are there, sort of deal.
Right.
But it's kind of a big deal to the local comic book stores because it gets them a lot of foot traffic and gets people in the door, and it's kind of a nice reminder of, you know, the fact that comic book stores still exist and you can still get into comics at any time. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of like the day after the Super Bowl when Denny's is like, we're going to give a free Grand Slam breakfast to all of America. Because the Grand Slam breakfast doesn't cost them all that much, but you come in and you're like, hey, I want a coffee or an orange juice, or I want to add on a biscuit or whatever. And they're like stores like Denny's across the country is packed all day long because everyone wants to get their, you know, free Grand Slam. But then people buy other stuff, and so they make more money. And then people are like, oh yeah, I haven't been to Denny's in forever. We should go back to Denny's again. That wasn't half bad.
Right.
I mean, when was the last time you've been in a Denny's?
More recently than I'd like to admit.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've been in a Denny's since like back in October when I came to see you when I came out for the World Series, and like we went to a Denny's like at 2 a.m.
Oh, that was the time.
Okay, yeah. So like that was the last time I went, but like, you know, I don't go there very often.
I was going to say that's still much more recently than I'd like to admit in certain career circles, work circles.
Sure. But
it's been over 10. It's been earlier than 10 years. So sorry.
Yeah. So, but that's my point, is that like the Free Comic Book Day and giving out a free comic or giving out the Grand Slam breakfast, if it brings people in and it gets traffic there, they're going to make money on other stuff, and it kind of gets people, you know, remembering that, you know, hey, this is a thing, come see us, blah, blah, blah. And it works. Yeah.
You know, I got to say, I mean, I love breakfast. Breakfast is probably my favorite meal of the day. Besides dessert, if that's a meal.
Listen, if lemon meringue pie had its own meal, that would be my favorite meal. But otherwise, since lemon meringue pie doesn't have its own meal, breakfast is my favorite.
Like breakfast, man. Yeah, you can get like, you know, hash browns or, you know, pancakes.
Biscuits and gravy.
Biscuits, a skillet, man. Or like when you come down, like bacon sizzling, like there's nothing better.
Those cheesy, those
cheesy hash browns?
Yes,
the cheesy hash browns?
The cheesy hash browns at Cracker Barrel. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Yeah. But it is the biggest freaking racket. I mean, when you really think about it, if you were to, like, 2 eggs and a piece of toast and a glass of orange juice, like $8? Are you freaking kidding me? Like, the margins on that crap, holy, like the Denny's and the IHOPs of the world, the Cracker Barrels. Oh my gosh, forget about it.
Definitely they're making money. But look, how often do you want to get up in the morning before your kids are up and like, I'm going to fry up some bacon and I'm going to make some over easy eggs and make some toast and like fresh squeeze some juice and I'm going to make some cheesy hash browns? No, you're thinking, I'm going to drop the kids off to school and on my way to work, I'm going to stop by and get a little to-go bag of Cracker Barrel. Which, by the way, I haven't had dinner yet, and I am so hungry right now.
You are seriously going to go to a Cracker Barrel after this? You make me sick.
I got them on speed dial. What am I going to tell you?
Cracker Barrel. Anyway, yes, I'm also hungry as well. We should have an episode about food. I know it's not necessarily in like pop culture per se. I mean, I guess the whole foodie trend, the whole foodie movement is kind of trendy, but yeah, like about like certain foods, man. Like, I don't know, childhood foods or maybe I don't know. We'll have to think about it.
I think we're just hungry right now. It's like if you were to drop me off at the grocery store, I probably would buy like everything that's like horrible for me, but it's quick to eat. It's like, give me those Hostess, Twinkies and give me ding dongs and a gallon of ice cream and give me
they always say
chicken.
Like, they always say like, don't shop when you're hungry. Yeah, there's a reason for that, folks.
Oh man,
reason for that.
Like I can go into a grocery store and be like, I need about $80 worth of groceries. But if I go hungry, it's like $160 worth of groceries. I'm like, baby, we needed this. She's like, that's a rack of ribs. What do we need a rack of ribs for? And now I'm like, we're gonna use it later. I promise. I'm hungry. I promise.
Right. Now, are you ever one that actually like partakes of food while you're in the store? I know there's probably a big
no, because that's stealing.
Faux pas.
So no, seriously, like okay.
You still pay for it.
No, so my mom, when she was raising us, she like we'd see people like walking around eating a few grapes from like a bag of grapes or whatever, and I'd always I liked that idea, but my mom, I remember like impressed upon me like. What happens if all of a sudden you go up there and you don't have enough money to pay for those grapes? And now you can't buy that bag of grapes and you got to turn them back. But like you've eaten like 12 grapes. Now you're just stealing. And you've got to find a way to pay for that. So you got to take something else back. And I remember that my mom just like really impressed upon us that like eating the food when you haven't paid for it yet, even though like technically you're going to pay for it, but you haven't paid for it yet, that's stealing. Now, so I have no problem.
Isn't that what you do at a restaurant, though?
Well, see, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's a moral dilemma, right? Because people will eat something and then dine and dash, and run out, which is obviously stealing. I think we can all agree on that. But I don't know. I mean, there's an expectation, though, like if you sit down and you order food, there's the expectation you're going to pay for that food. Whereas like at a grocery store, like I could walk in and just like put everything in my cart, walk around for an hour, and then just leave my cart and walk away just to, I don't know, make some bag boy's day where he's got to go put everything back.
You got the time.
Right. You're going to go make your $8 an hour. I don't know. But that's the way I grew up. So like because I guess like I really do view it as a form of stealing, and this is only me. I don't judge anyone else. You do you eat them grapes, you eat that fudge sickle as you're walking around, or you carry around a little warmer device and you heat up that frozen pizza and you eat it as you go. I don't care. But just for me, like the way I grew up and the way my mom impressed upon me, like I won't do that. So like we'll go and like I'll be dang hungry and I'll just walk around and I won't eat anything. But then like if I'm really, really hungry, I'll grab something that, like I can eat on the car ride home. But I've already paid for it at that point. So
here's the thing though, with grapes, I think it's an interesting point, and we won't spend too much more time on this for you listening audiences at home. But you do actually weigh the grapes at purchase, right? So if you've eaten the grapes, technically you have stolen those grapes because you are not by weight paying for them. So
true.
I agree with your mother in that sense. My thought is sometimes I'll like grab like a chocolate milk, like a milk chug or whatever, and I'll chug that. And of course I will still, have her scan the bottle and still pay for it. It's not a weight thing. So anyway, perhaps we've gone on long enough, but for those moral dilemmas out there, don't frickin' eat the grapes. We know who you are.
I love the fact that I'm just now thinking, have I ever walked through a grocery store where I've seen you eat food? Because this is also a little weird. Like if I'm with someone who is doing that, like it hurts me. Like I feel it on the inside. Like, no, that person's stealing. I'm walking around with someone who's stealing it. What am I supposed to do? Do I have to turn my friend in? Do I have to citizens arrest?
Right. Why do you have a taser, Spence? This grape just turned into a raisin in my mouth. Oh, that's how grapes are made, or raisins are made, actually. They individually tase every grape.
Yes, that's exactly how they're made. They're like, hey,
California
man,
raisins.
I'm going to be a raisin one day, but I don't like the taser. I don't know what I'm going to do. Moral dilemma of the grape. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. So, moving on with, what the crap? I'm looking at the time takeaway. It's been like 10 minutes. Okay.
Awesome.
So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was Kevin, and I'm going to slaughter his name, Kevin Frege? Anyway.
Faggy? I think it's Faggy.
Faggy? Sure.
Phage.
Yeah. He has been...
Kevin. Let's just call him Kevin.
We'll call him Kevin like we know him.
Yeah.
He's the man helming the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and there was an article recently that talked about kind of this thought of the crossover between TV and movies, and if he thinks there could be a crossover, which he eventually does. He eventually sees that there could be kind of some, colliding of these two worlds, and I think we've seen that in... Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We saw Agent Clawson, who did technically die in one of the Marvel films, then come back in TV.
Wait. Agent Coulson dies and then comes back? I'm just teasing. I've seen it. I know what I know he's talking about. I'm messing.
It's been like 10 years. And we've also seen, the new Gifted X-Men. We've seen some other X-Men shows come out. So, there's a bit of kind of melding of these two worlds of silver screen to TV screen. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that or any commentary?
I definitely think that we're going to get to a place where they're going to do crossovers more. But I think probably the reason why has been hesitant to see it happen is that movies, take... sometimes upwards of 2.5 years before they're in the can and ready to go. Whereas like a TV show, you're going to have writers that are going to be writing those episodes, maybe, 3 months out, maybe 6 months out. Maybe episodes are being written during the beginning of the season for later in the same season they're going to come out. And so things are a little more fluid and a little quicker on a week-to-week basis in TV. So I think you can do good crossovers, but I just think they have to be planned out really, really well in advance and make sure they're going to hit. I mean, I know that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did some of that with Winter Soldier, and and it seemed to work pretty well and felt good, but you have to have that planned in advance. And I think that's the only way you do it.
Yeah. So the timing does become an issue. Yeah,
because otherwise it's like, hey, we just saved New York from this big Chitauri alien invasion. It's like, yeah, that was like 5 years ago in the MCU films. You're a little behind, guys, right? I mean, that just,
Right.
So...
well, there you go.
Anyway, Steve, did you see, I don't know if maybe you did or not, I can't remember if you're on Instagram or not, but Orlando Bloom and Elijah Wood and Viggo Mortensen and a couple of the others decided that they're going to, like, those guys that filmed obviously all the Lord of the Rings, like, they're still really good friends. Yeah. And it was like, I can't remember if it was Billy Boyd's Instagram that had it, but basically, or maybe no, Dominic Monaghan. Basically, what had happened was they got together for like a little mini reunion, and apparently they get together like pretty much like once a year or every so often, and they kind of just hang out, and they were getting together to talk for some sort of like 15-year anniversary kind of thing of Lord of the Rings back in December. But anyway, they got together, they took a whole bunch of pictures, they're on Instagram, it's really kind of awesome seeing them all together, and they actually kind of recreated the scene from the Mines of Moria where they're all kind of like right waiting at the doors and positioned with like, their bows and their knives and swords, and and whatnot, except this time they did it and they're all holding like forks and spoons and knives, just like little cutlery that they had at this table, this like restaurant they were at. And so anyway, I don't know if a lot of people like that kind of stuff or seen that stuff, but my love for those Lord of the Rings movies and for J.R.R. Tolkien's books, I mean, it's some of my favorite literature, and those movies were just an amazing adaptation of those books. And I've just got a special place in my heart for these guys. And so I like seeing that they're still friends and they still get together. I mean, that just, I don't know, it warms my heart.
I think the same thing. I love those movies, and I still, when you watch those movies, just amazing. Just the cinematography, the epic scope of those. All of the actors were spot on. It's awesome. So, I agree with you.
Do you remember though, like that these guys were so close when they were filming the Fellowship of the Ring? Like they all got matching tattoos. Like they went out.
Yeah.
And they got the matching symbol for the number 9 in J.R.R. Tolkien's Elvish script. The only person that didn't do it was Jonathan Rhys.
Sean Astin?
No, Sean Astin did it. It was Jonathan Rhys Davies, the guy that plays Gimli. But his stunt double did it instead. And so, but like, I just think it's awesome. Like Sir Ian McKellen has like the number 9 in Elvish tattooed on him somewhere. Like, they were that close that they all went out and got matching tattoos. And I love hearing stories that like a cast comes together in that kind of like a way that like they want to do something that bonds them together for life.
Well, and I have to imagine that experience of filming those movies. I remember, watching some behind the scenes, whatever, of one of the discs when Viggo Mortensen is talking about the battle at Helm's Deep. And he goes into detail about the 3 months they spent in this like hellhole,
right?
Filming this thing, and the weather was horrible, and it was raining every day, and all these extras. I mean, they had thousands of extras to play all the orcs, and he said that everybody just came together like there was like this compound, And at the end, I mean, they had T-shirts. I survived Helm's Deep,
right?
And I can only imagine that even though it is a movie and it's all Hollywood, that there is sacrifice and toil and blood and sweat and tears and all the rest. So, almost like soldiers in a war, there's something that, experiences in your life that bond you. And I'm sure that these films were very similar to that. So it's very cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. I love seeing stuff like that. So
I like that story, and I like, even though I don't know obviously, but I like all these actors. I think you can get a sense of actors and actresses. I don't like Ben Affleck. I don't like, but whatever. Nothing against him, I guess. But it is cool to see to see something like that. So
right.
I had one thing that I wanted to talk about as well. The Disney Digital Network. So it's kind of their channel, their space on YouTube. There was an article recently about kind of this whole, PewDiePie thing that happened where it kind of tarnished their name. They're trying to distance themselves from some negative press and some things that were said, some anti-Semitism and some other things. And so this article talked about how they are trying to do more what's called quote unquote guided creation, or guided curation. So they've got a lot of these creators out there that are making content and whatnot, and as they are falling under the Disney umbrella, Disney is trying to make efforts to kind of pull back those reins and to make sure that they have more control, in the content that's coming out, to make sure it's Disney branded, Disney quality, and it falls under the mission statement of Disney. So
that makes a lot of sense to me, just because, I mean, they got so many people. Like, I know Brita watches these, YouTube channels I know one of them's called Fresh Baked, and like these people, like they've got like a Patreon. So like people like will donate money every month, a little bit of money, but it adds up. And like these guys have like gotten like better cameras and, video equipment, and they've got passes to Disneyland, and like they go every week or every weekend, and they film them going on rides. And I know there's other like YouTube channels where all they do is they show them like, eating all the different foods at Disneyland. And like my wife went back to Disneyland for her birthday back in March, and she went to some of these places that she watched on these YouTube channels, and she was telling me about these salmon nachos at like this little pier place over in California Adventure. And it's like, It's not like a big well-known place. It's not like, the Corn Dog Castle over there that like everyone goes to, or it's not, something where like, hey, we're going to go get sweets over at the Emporium over in Disneyland like everyone does. But it's this like smaller place, but they have some amazing food. And so like she went there and, tried some of that food because she watched that. So there's lots of people that are out there doing content and creating stuff that aren't like, doing like animated whatever. So I can see though how they maybe want to have a closer hand in the process of like kind of keeping an eye on like what people are doing, what kind of content, because it drives traffic to their Disney stuff, and that's important to them. I mean, brand recognition is key and huge when it comes to big corporations.
Well, yeah, and obviously this brand is one of the largest in the world, and obviously they're going to do anything they can to protect it and to make sure that the name is not tarnished from some, haphazard YouTuber that starts spouting off, slanderous, comments about race or otherwise. One of the things that it mentioned in this article, though, is that it's contemplating having creators, asking YouTube creators to sign morality clauses as part of their contractual obligations with Disney, which I thought was interesting. And it was kind of a exclamation point was put on that because this weekend, as I was doing some chores down in the basement, I was folding laundry or something, I was like, I'm just going to put something on Netflix. And so I love stand-up comedy, and I watched this guy. I don't know if you know him, Gabriel Iglesias.
Oh yeah,
it's Fluffy,
man.
Yeah. So Fluffy. So he's funny guy. Just kind of tells stories. Not really like a 1-2 kind of beat to his comedy. It's more just telling stories. But he's funny, and he talked about how he's recently kind of come under the Disney banner because he's doing some comedy tour. And I don't know if it's with NBC or whatever, but now he's under the Disney banner, and he's really concerned because he's like, when you sign with Disney, you got to have a clean slate. They check your background. They check your online content and what you've already put out there. And he's like, I don't want to say anything during one of my stand-up things. Then, so the mouse is going to come to the door and be like, you're done. It's like the freaking mafia.
Right.
Put him in the red shoes and put him in the river.
And let's be honest, if Disney was the mafia, they're not going to send Mickey Mouse to come get you. It's going to be Pete. He's the one that's going to come get you. Pete? You remember Pete is like the big cat, and he like smokes a cigar back in some of the old films. He's like always like the villain in like the Mickey Mouse clubhouses, and like they kind of use him now, and he's like not as scary, but like back in the day, he's like, all alone without your little friend.
Oh yeah. I didn't ever. He was like the big fat guy, right?
Yep, the big fat cat. Yep.
I always wondered if he was a cat or a dog. Well, yeah. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting that Disney is pulling back on the reins, but it makes a lot of sense.
Sure. Something, Steve, I saw that happened this last week, or we heard about this week, that I figured a lot of people may be interested in, that the director of Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson, actually asked for a change at the end of Episode 7, The Force Awakens. So if you remember,
really?
Yeah, if you remember,
I hadn't seen this.
You remember at the end of Force Awakens, Rey takes the Millennium Falcon and she goes off to find Luke, right?
Right.
And do you remember which droid she has with her?
BB-8?
She does not. She has
R2?
She has R2-D2. Originally, the script said that BB-8 goes off with her. And because of the movie and because BB-8 was kind of a bigger role in the movie, they thought like, BB-8, she finds BB-8 on Jakku after the kind of the explosion and whatnot, and he kind of follows with her most of the movie. They figured that kind of would make sense that she would go with him. And Rian Johnson came back and said like, listen, I know you want to do that, but realistically, R2-D2 is Luke's droid counterpart, and BB-8 really belongs to Poe Dameron. Please, if you can make this change, send R2-D2 with, because that's also going to help with some storytelling things that I need to do in Episode 8, which we talked about in the episode Old Man Luke a few weeks ago, where we see that scene where Luke like puts the metal hand on R2-D2 and it looks like everything's kind of crumbling around him and everything's been kind of bombed out. And then we see, it looks like a preview of some of that going on. So anyway, the director of episode 8 wanted specifically R2-D2 for some specific storytelling reasons. And he said that it just feels right that R2-D2 is reunited with Luke Skywalker since, you know, he once belonged to Obi-Wan Kenobi, he claimed, and then he became, you know, passed into ownership of Luke Skywalker. So anyway, it's a little nugget. It doesn't probably mean a whole heck of a lot, but for some of us, though, you hear that and you're just like, cool, that is just awesome.
I mean, come on, let's be honest. BB-8's a chump. All right,
dude,
he's a punk.
BB-8's kind of awesome. Let's be honest.
Dude, in a fight, I'm saying R2.
Oh.
BB-8's got he's very agile. He's very agile, but I think R2 has some tricks up his sleeve.
With BB-8, we only see the one arm that comes out with the little lighter. I mean, so you could burn something, you know. But with R2-D2, he's got two arms. He could grab
shock
you,
the crap
and then
out
he
of
could shock you. Yes, exactly.
I love how a tin can that only makes beeps and noises can have such personality. You know?
Right.
Like that and like Doctor Strange's cloak, they could have a whole movie together.
Absolutely. Steve, there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about. Do you know the name Stanley Weston?
Stanley Weston. I think I owe him $5. I don't know.
No, probably not. Stanley Weston basically is the man behind G.I. Joe. He basically, the story goes that in the 1960s, he was basically a former soldier. He was getting into the advertising business after his service in the Army, and he had this idea to pitch a boy-oriented doll to Hasbro, kind of in the similar veins of like Barbie, because there was Barbie and Ken in the early 60s that were really popular. And he had this idea that, you know, he could market a boy-oriented doll that they ended up coining the phrase action figure, and it was based on military themes, and G.I. Joe was born, and they came when, you know, sailors and Marines and Army, and basically he started the whole franchise of G.I. Joes, which obviously has been in, you know, comics and action figures and movies, animated series, and he basically sold the concept for $100,000, and it flourished, and then later on in life, he kept going and he did other stuff, and then he eventually helped create another smash toy and animated hit, Thundercats.
Are you serious?
Yes. Anyway.
Oh my gosh.
Stanley Weston died this last month at the age of 84, and so I know it's not a not a huge necessarily story, but it's just kind of interesting that, you know, this one man, you know, out of his military service and getting into advertising, decided to make basically G.I. Joes and market them, and then ended up getting into Thundercats. And I know you and I grew up on G.I. Joes and Thundercats, and that was a big part of our childhood. So I just thought I'd mention that and bring that up. So,
well, thank you. Is it Stanley, you said?
Yes, Stanley Weston.
Thank you, Stanley. God bless you, man. That was God bless you for your propaganda.
Right. Steve, cool. Last week we had our movie club, and we talked about the movie Hidden Figures, and we asked our listeners kind of what they felt about movies that are loosely based on a real story. Does that detract from the movie-going experience for them? Does it not? And we wanted to get their responses, and so we have a few. And so I thought we should get into these. The first one I want to get to is on the email. And if you're going to take a guess, who are you going to say emailed us?
I would say Peter the Man Christensen.
Peter Christensen, you got it. Dear nerds, loved hearing you talk about Hidden Figures this week. I saw the movie in theaters at a special engagement. The Museum of Flight in Seattle hosted a screening, and we were able to attend because of a program our girls are enrolled in there. It was a very diverse audience with more participation and reaction than a normal movie audience. While it didn't have the big action scenes that you go to a theater for, the emotional power of watching it in a theater full of young girls and adult and elderly women of color was beyond anything I could get at home. Now, it's interesting. This is, side tangent here real quick.
That's awesome.
We did talk about like whether or not we thought it was a movie you could go see in the theaters. And we all kind of agreed, like, it's not like a big summer tentpole, action-y movie you'd want to go see. However, he does bring up a good point. If it's like a special event or it's something, like he said, it was at the Museum of Flight in Seattle he went to, where they were, with a group of young women, who'd earned the honor to be there. Like that kind of stuff I could definitely see going for because it's an event. It's a bigger cultural thing. So anyway.
It'd be like, watching Schindler's List with like Holocaust survivors. Like, yeah, that would be an amazing experience.
Right. He goes on to say, he says, during the movie, my daughters kept asking why everyone was treating the ladies so weird, and I had to whisper explanations about segregation and overt racism. They got so mad when they heard that people treated other people like that. It warmed my heart that the world has changed so much that my kids didn't even know that segregation had happened. It also reminded me that respect, kindness, and fairness are not free, and that there are opposing forces always ready to roll back the dignity that the women in the movie fought so hard for. It doesn't surprise me to hear the facts of the movie were, enhanced for the screen, but I feel that like you don't have to do that for movies in a way that you don't for books. But I feel like you have to do that for movies in a way that you don't for books. They did a good and fair job of it. Another example of this technique was in Pearl Harbor, where everything that happened to Josh Hartnett and Ben Affleck, he says it always comes back to Ben Affleck, doesn't it, Steve?
Freaking does.
Anything that happened to those two basically happened to some U.S. military person, and they were kind of folded into these two characters rather than 50 different dudes, each having one amazing scene. I thought Hidden Figures was extremely well executed as a movie, casting, story, dialogue, conflict, characters, even the feel of the era and the music. I loved it as much as any movie I can remember recently, and watching this along with Moana and Rogue One made December 2016 an awesome time to be a father with daughters. Thank you for another great show, and may the 4th be with you.
Freaking awesome. Well said, well written, and as a man with daughters myself, it's some powerful words, my friend.
I can only imagine though, like what he's trying to like go through, like trying to be quiet in the movie theater, but also like, exactly. Well, let me explain to you what segregation was and what racism was. Like that would be a really hard conversation, I think, in general to tell someone about it who hasn't experienced it or has no frame of reference, but let alone when you're in a movie theater trying to be quiet. That's got to be a little difficult, right?
Everybody's like, shut up! You're like, I'm talking about segregation here!
Right. Going over to Twitter, Ian Corey Drake at iDrake76 says,
what's up, Ian?
Absolutely. If the event interested you enough to make it into a movie, why is there a need to embellish it? So he's basically saying, it bothers him, like creative license bothers him, if there's enough. Yeah. If there's enough to make the movie, you don't need to embellish it. You just kind of go with what you got. And I understand that. I mean, I'm on that fence somewhat as well. Eric Gifford over on Facebook says, to make a good movie from a real story, most of the time, you'll need to do this. Hold true to the essence of the source and the person/event, and you can be successful. Recently, I watched the biopic Steve Jobs in preparation for reading the book it was based on, knowing that I'd enjoy watching the movie more without having to worry about inconsistencies. I've since finished the book, and the movie takes some big liberties, but for a very specific purpose that fits the structure of what is a really fun, creative, and well-made script. Both book and movie do a great job delivering the same story about Steve Jobs, each in a way that makes sense for the format in which it is delivered. So, I don't know about you, Steve, but I mean, I can kind of see some of those perspectives, right?
Sure.
I can get on board with that. Yeah, I mean, I can see that, I guess, but at the same time, there's some movies that I just don't think you don't need to gin up too much. The story that's there is good. If you change it for pacing issues or flow issues or to make it more concise, I'm okay with that. But like, if you're inventing stuff entirely, that I'm not cool with.
Right. And I think there's a big difference between, like you said, there's just sometimes when you have, the bookends of a story and a little bit of the middle, and you've obviously got to fill in, you've got to fill in the gaps. You've got to fill in the holes. So, oddly enough, so with Lion that we watched this week, that was one where I don't think there was much added per se. I mean, I don't know the story specifically, but at the end it has the epilogue and it talks about how, they were reunited and all these things. And it seemed from just not doing any other research about the movie that it was fairly true to form, and that a lot of the things that happened, were more just character development things that were probably fill-ins, right? Relationships with he and his girlfriend, and relationships with he and his other adopted brother, and things of that nature. But it didn't seem like there were things that were made up. Now flip that to Masterminds, which is the story or the movie that we watched with Zach Galifianakis, which is the true story of, or based loosely on a true story of, a $17 million, armored car heist. And, you probably had tons. I mean, you've got freaking Owen Wilson as the bad guy who gets like a freaking jacked up Geoprism hatchback with like these huge, monster truck tires, and you've got Zach Galifianakis' character with his long flowing hair, and a lot of things just to add corniness and humor to the movie that, just to make a funny movie. And it was very, very loosely based on the story itself.
Right. Well, every week we ask you guys a question. We appreciate your interaction and you letting us know, your take on our question. You can always answer the question every week on Twitter at FordofNerd, or you can reach us through the email at fordofnerd@gmail.com, or Facebook, which is facebook.com/FordofNerd. Those are the main ways you can get a hold of us. Keep interacting. We love hearing from you. We love talking with friends of ours and interacting. Steve, we're always looking for more friends of the Fortress of Nerditude, people that can join us and kick off their shoes and put their feet up on the coffee table. How can our current friends help us find more friends?
They can rate us on iTunes, so the Fortress of Nerditude isn't as hard to find as the Fortress of Solitude.
I love that. Throwing it old school.
Old school, man. Old school. No, we love it. We've gotten some more reviews on iTunes, and we love hearing that people are enjoying the show.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna do this no matter what. If we had 2 listeners or if we had 2,000 listeners, it's not gonna matter because we have fun doing this every week. But we do appreciate you guys coming and spending a little bit of time of your week with us every week, and we're glad you're here. Anyway, Steve, I told you that I watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, right?
Right.
And I'm not going to go into it. However, I do want to ask you this. So, we've talked, I don't know, maybe the last 10, 15 years on and off about the idea of, we should find some sort of a way to write something, write a spec script for TV or, a TV comedy or maybe some sort of a movie, because we know each other well enough and, we get each other's humor and we kind of get, the writing story beats, when we tell stories together and we're laughing and we got a kind of a room interested in, whatever crazy tale of our youth we're regaling them with. And I was thinking about that as we do from time to time. And I was thinking if we were to write a movie, would you just want to do something brand new, or would you want to come into a story that's already there and write a sequel?
It's a good question, and not to pull an Al Gore or anything, but way back in the day, this has probably been 10 years ago now, we did talk about doing it was a coffee table book or something about the art of manliness or just being fathers or whatnot.
Yeah.
Talking about
the Bro Bible.
The Bro Bible, the 100 rules of being a dude or something like that. And no joke, 5 years thereafter, all these things started coming out about manliness, art of manliness, stepping up, and anyway, they stole it.
Hey, but by the way, though, let's not upset Brett McKay at the Art of Manliness, because that guy runs an awesome website and he's got a podcast and
no doubt,
no doubt. No. You are right. We did talk about that idea well before anything was big anywhere, and I'm sure other people talked about it too. I mean, yeah, we're not Al Gore in this, but big shout out to Brett McKay and what they're doing over there. I love that site. I don't know him. I'm not friends with him. I would like to be friends with him. He seems like a cool dude. But anyway, yes, we talked about that, and now there's this, and we missed out on the opportunity back then. So
what I love about that podcast too is it is very useful. I mean, I've gone there for negotiating, a better salary, or killing a bear with your hands, all these just awesome podcast. He has some good guests.
I like the ones where like he brings on like retired military guys who like, this is how we did it in World War, II or in Vietnam, and this is like the mental process we go through, and like the OODA loop that they talk about, and like how they evaluate like tactics that are being used on the battlefield. Just cool stuff. Anyway, little side tangent.
So back to your original question. I mean, I would love to say that I would love to do like an original something, but the fact is I've probably not had an original thought in my mind in the last 15 years. So I'm always enthralled with a good sequel, but it's a tough thing. It's almost kind of the elusive unicorn of film is to make a sequel that is worth making, I guess.
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the things, like, I think as we watch a bunch of sequels, because sequels are everywhere, remakes, I think like one of the biggest
tons
things,
of remakes lately.
Yeah, I mean, they're all over the place. So like you and I have talked about this a ton, like some movies like deserve a sequel or should have a sequel. And then others you're like, yeah, why are we doing a sequel of this? Like there's no real reason. So like, I think like one of the first things, like if we ever did it, like, if we ever to write something and we were going to do a sequel, like the first thing is like you have to evaluate whether or not it's going to need a sequel. Like for instance, do you remember the Highlander movie? Obviously, like we tried to do our own like remake in the parking lot of Northern Illinois, but like that movie was a cool movie. Do you remember Highlander 2: The Quickening though, the sequel?
The virtually non-connected, incoherent. Yeah, I remember the sequel.
Right. And so like the problem was like at the end of the first movie, like the whole kind of like plot is, there can only be one. And at the end, there's one guy left standing. How do you go back and do a sequel? Right?
That was the signature line of the film, right? There can be only one.
There can be only one. They
should have taken that to heart when making the second movie. There should have been only one.
Right. So like, does the movie warrant a sequel? A movie from our childhood, E.T. I love E.T. I think E.T. is a masterpiece by Steven Spielberg. Do you think they ever should have done a sequel on E.T.?
Well, I thought I read something somewhere where they almost did. And then I think Spielberg or the studio, whoever, pulled back. And I think it's, you think about that, and it's because the original didn't warrant that, right? It ended, and it ended perfectly.
E.T. goes home. Spoiler alert, by the way.
That's right. You jerk.
Right. I mean, he goes home. So, like, how do you do the sequel? Like, E.T. Part 2. He forgot his car keys, so he came back and then got re-stranded again.
Right. And that it opens up a whole can of worms that doesn't need to be opened up. So, and there are plenty of movies out there that don't deserve a sequel that if one was made, it would be disappointing. And on the flip side, there are many that obviously were made that never should have been made. I think about Goonies from our childhood, another one. I'm like, yeah, maybe, they go chase the pirate ship and they can have another adventure, but it was so perfect as it was. Like, don't ever touch that. And I hope they never remake it either. I'm like, don't do a Footloose. Don't do a Dukes of Hazzard. Don't do a whatever. Don't do that again.
Right. Yeah. Like, so what you're saying is like, don't just remake the original.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, like, what's one of the other ones that just, Will Smith's kid was in it? What was that?
The Karate Kid.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't, Ralph Macchio, man.
Daniel
don't mess with that
freaking LaRusso.
Yeah, man. Pat Maeda.
Pat Morita.
Morita.
Yeah, Morita, not Moita. You're thinking like you're crossing Morita and Moana, and you kind of got a Moita.
No. Scott Moita was a cop in our town growing up in Sycamore. He always used to bust me for riding my motorcycle all over the place. So, Scott Maeda, screw you.
I don't think he's listening. We're probably okay. But no, you're right. Like, don't make the original. Like, the Karate Kid with Will Smith's kid and Jackie Chan. I was like, I had no interest in seeing that. Plus, also, I do consider Karate Kid to be one of the quintessential 80s movies. Like, it's just perfect time capsule for that era. So, yeah, you don't want to just... I'm tired of the remakes. Like, I wouldn't do a remake. I wouldn't just take something and remake it and be like, hey, here you go. Here's this again. Now, on the flip side, like, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, for me, that kind of fits into that category, Steve, because it really was just a remake of A New Hope. It really was. I mean, they did do a couple things different, but I mean, it was too close to that. So that was like my one knock, which is a very minor knock because I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I can listen. If I could forgive some of the early stuff and some of the prequels, I mean, I can't forgive Jar Jar. I mean, I just can't. But
no one should.
But I mean, if I can forgive some of the other stuff,
So here's one that I thought of just while you were talking about that. So Annie. I grew up on musicals, and I used to watch Annie all the time.
Shirley Temple?
Annie. No, dang it. I don't even know what her name is, but no, it's not Shirley Temple.
It's a hard knock life for us.
That's not Shirley Temple.
That's not Shirley Temple? I never saw those movies. I don't know.
Shirley Temple was like in black and white. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so yeah, Annie, they remade it obviously with Jamie Foxx and Cameron Diaz and stuff.
Right.
And
yeah.
The music has actually sadly grown on me a little bit. But
really?
Just the remake of Tim Curry was in the original, and like Madeline Kahn and, Albert Finney and Annie, whoever her name is for real, but she was amazing. It's like that didn't need a remake. And I did not appreciate the urban take on my childhood. So
yeah. Well, here's something else like to think about. I don't know if we've ever kind of maybe put this to thought. Maybe or put this thought to words, but like, if you go to see a sequel, isn't there some part of you that like wants to see something like new with those characters or that world, but at the same time, like you don't want it to be like too new or too original. Like it needs to have like a feeling of like consistency of like the same, but yet be like new. You know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense at all?
Well, I think that is entirely personified in the Rocky movies, right? Like, I think about, the Rocky movies, and you wouldn't want to see, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to see him at the top of his game, beating some schmo.
Beating everyone to a pulp, right? Because the first one, he's an underdog.
Exactly. And they managed to still... with the second and with the third with the Russians and with the fourth when he's kind of lost his way and become, nothing again. And they seem to have kind of reinvented that with every storytelling in my mind.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know what you're saying. Like there was part of me like, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but like going into see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, like I was wondering like, how is this going to feel compared to the original? Like you kind of hit on it when you said like, hey, how was the music? Like how was the soundtrack? Because the first one had such a great soundtrack and, we got to know all these new characters and I kind of went in like, is this going to have like a similar feel? But at the same time, I want like a new story because I don't want it just to be something similar. And it was very satisfying. I'm not going to say anything more. It really was very satisfying kind of to that. But I think you're right. Like, we want to see something that's the same, and so like it feels comfortable in the sense like that we can identify real quick, and like we can latch onto things like, oh yes, I remember this or feeling like this or this emotional beat with this character. But like we want something different and new, and need maybe some new characters to spice it up a little bit. So
right, well, like going back to Rocky, yeah. So in the third film, he's succumbing to kind of this false success. He's getting kind of soft. He's getting beaten, and he's got to make a comeback. In the fourth, it was also this impossible fight, just like it was with the Russian, just like it was with Apollo Creed. But this had like a little bit of a color of revenge, kind of under the guise of revenge. So they took the same story of the underdog, fighting the unwinnable fight, right, and added certain elements to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah, I get that. Something else. I don't know. I really don't know how to put this, but like, when you see a movie and like you really love it, and then like you go and see the sequel, and it feels like whatever like happened in the first movie is like all undone. Like I'm trying to think of like a good example. Like gosh, like like a movie. Like Ghostbusters. Okay, yeah. Okay, here. Ghostbusters. You remember in Ghostbusters, like at the end of Ghostbusters, spoiler alert, by the way, for, like a movie that came out in 1986. Ghostbusters, great comedic movie. I mean, I love that. I don't think a remake was needed. That's my personal opinion. However, you know how like at the end of that movie, though, like they defeat Gozer the Gozerian, and they defeat the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, right? And like Peter Venkman, Bill Murray, he gets Sigourney Weaver, he gets the girl, and
Rick Moranis.
Yeah, Rick Moranis. Yeah, and like they're like the the heroes of the city, remember? And like that's how there's like a big.
Don't they have a parade?
Yeah, there's a parade, and gosh, I love that scene because it's like all the people that were just out there, like praying for like the end of the world that they're gonna be okay, then are like out there in like this big parade. And anyway, I can actually hear the music, the soundtrack in my mind when I think about it good enough, long enough. Anyway, but like, do you remember how the second movie starts out? Like the Ghostbusters are like disbanded and they've been like shamed, and like Peter Venkman's not with Dana anymore, and like she's with that like that artist guy, and like she's working
that blonde-haired guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
I hadn't recalled, but I now recall.
Right. So like what I don't like about like sequels that do that is like our group like went through this like experience, or our characters went through this big experience, and like they overcame something and they accomplished something in the original, but then in the sequel, it's like, and we're back to square one, and we've got to have them build up and do something all over again. I hate that.
Right.
Right.
No, I could not agree more. And you're right. You sit down and you start. You're ready for the continuation of the story that you obviously. You were invested in and whatnot, and suddenly everything that's happened doesn't mean anything. Everything has a negative tone, and you almost just become disengaged. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You just don't want to see your characters regress, right? You want to see them go forward. Like, if you think about like really good sequels, like what would you say are like some sequels are like really good at like moving a character like forward and continuing them on?
I think one of the ones that comes to mind immediately is Godfather Part 2, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you see, I mean, I freaking love that movie. And you see Michael Corleone, taking his rightful place as leading the family, the Corleone family, and all the things that he has to do to kind of, stake his claim. That's a huge movie, and I think it does it expertly at showing, his progression, his moving forward, and the story as well. I think that's a textbook for me. What about you?
I mean, you're right on the money. I mean, something this like, I know this is kind of sounds a little silly, but I got young boys, and so I see a lot of this. Toy Story. Toy Story is an excellent film, but like the characters like move forward in Toy Story 2. I mean, the place that like Woody and Buzz are at in their relationship like has solidified at the end of that movie, and like going into the next movie, Woody gets stolen, and like Buzz like cares about him and wants to bring him back, and like it's not because like he accidentally did something like in the first movie and he's like just trying to make it an atonement for it. He actually cares about his friend, and so he's like gonna like launch this whole rescue operation to go find him. And so like the characters move forward, and then like even if you go to like Toy Story 3, like character development continues in that movie, and like the plots moves on obviously, and it's a different story. But like the characters don't seem stale. Like they seem like they've progressed in some way or another. So like that's kind of a kiddie, example. But I mean, it's a legitimate example, and I see that all the time. Obviously, the big one for me is going to be Empire Strikes Back. I mean, you take sure. Where everything ends at the first movie with the characters and kind of where they're at. And then, Luke has this, whole story arc in that movie where he's kind of on a mission of self-discovery more than ever, and like trying to figure out who he is. And, Han's trying to reconcile with, where's he at in his life versus kind of his old life. And, that movie obviously moves the needle forward on moving the character's arc and keep them moving.
Well, and I think one thing that it does well is that it takes the experiences that they had in the first film and builds upon those, and thus the decisions and the things that they do in the following film and later in the story are a direct result of those experiences, right?
Right.
One of the examples that I love, and I know we've talked about it a lot in this podcast, Terminator 2. I love that movie. And to see, obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger changed dramatically, but Sarah Ripley, I mean, she's now a mother, and she's got to take care of this child and protect him, and so she's got these motherly instincts.
You mean Sarah Connor?
Sarah Connor. What did I
You
say?
said Sarah Ripley. I'm like, is he meshing like aliens? And
Aliens is another great example as well.
I mean, it's the James Cameron because he did both of the sequels for Alien and Terminator. Anyway, sorry, I know what you're talking about.
The heroine, Linda Hamill, but was just a great maturing, I guess, from a scared woman who didn't really know what was going on to like this leader and this mother, and
she was bad A in that second movie.
Oh, when she's doing pull-ups in like the psycho ward,
one-handed, she's holding onto her
one-handed,
wrist. Yeah,
love that junk. Love that
awesome.
Junk. Yeah, so I totally agree. Moving the character forward and having them relate to the earlier portions of the story in the first film, I think is paramount.
Well, what's also cool about T2 is that they took Arnold and they totally flipped the script with him, right? Because the T-800, was, the killer robot that was coming after Sarah Connor in the first one. And then they changed it so he's now the protector of John Connor in the second one. And it made it fresh. It still felt like, kind of like we were talking about a second ago, like it still felt similar, and like you identified and knew what it was, and like when you first see it on screen you're like, oh crap, run John, run, and then you find out like, no, he's trying to protect you against a greater threat, and it was a twist, but yet it still like moves kind of the needle forward on the story and the character. I'll tell you though what I don't like. I hate sequels that don't have like the original characters in them, or like they like write them out for whatever reason, or what? Like I can't stand that.
Yeah. It's funny because I was just at a library and I saw a film, and this isn't like probably shouldn't even be mentioned, but it's Nim's Island, and
I have no clue what that is.
It's just this funny story about this girl who gets left on this island, and she kind of creates this Swiss Family Robinson thing where she's got this whole tree house and she's waiting for it, and she becomes very managing, I guess, but the original star of the film was the girl that was in Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Was that no Little Miss Sunshine? Sorry, Little Miss Sunshine.
Oh yeah.
Abigail
Breslin. Abigail Breslin.
Yeah.
She's
a great actress. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. She was in the first one. And so my kids were at the library looking for a film. And so I pulled them like, oh, Nim's Island. I pulled it out and say, oh, Nim's Island too. And I turn it over. And immediately it's just some girl I don't recognize. I'm like, ugh. I just put it back in. I'm like, that is basically like a red flag to say, we didn't care enough about the story or the thing. We just want to make some money and throw another one out there because we know people will watch it. But we don't really care. I mean, it's like a throwaway.
Right. I mean, like, do you remember when Jurassic Park came out? Jurassic Park, huge movie. Do you remember Jurassic Park 2, though? Like, Jurassic Park 2, like, had, like, maybe, like, one, like, holdover character. Like, Jeff Goldblum, I think, was in it. And then, like, what's his name? Like,
Sam.
Yes.
Laura Dern.
Yeah, Laura Dern. I wasn't in it. Sam. Oh, it's going to kill me. No, not Sam Kinison.
No, he's the
comedian.
He's the comedian.
Let me tell you. Yeah, different guy. I know the guy you're
Sam Johnson.
No, anyway.
He's got a very like plain name, like John Johnson.
Right. You look it up on IMDb and I'll go on. But what I didn't like about that movie is like I felt like you're gonna do a sequel of
Samuel L. Jackson's the first Sam that comes up. It's not him.
Hold on to your butts.
Hold on to your butts. Right. Great line.
No.
Sam Neill.
Sam Neill, yes.
What a forgettable name.
He was in that for like a split second and it's like, hey, if you're doing a sequel without the main characters, like no one wants to see that crap. Like, do you remember like the Fast and the Furious movie, like the first one? Like Fast and the Furious, Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, like that was cool. And then I remember like they did a second one and I was excited to see it. I think even like we watched it when we were in college and it had Paul Walker, but it didn't have Vin Diesel in it. And then like the next movie I think was like
had Vin Diesel.
It was in Tokyo and had Vin Diesel, but no Paul Walker. And it wasn't until like the fourth movie like they put the band back together, and it was like, yeah, skip 2, skip 3, wait till the band gets back together. Like
is that when Michelle Rodriguez enters the picture?
I think she's actually not in that movie. I think she comes back in number 5.
Okay.
But that's about the time I stopped watching that movie franchise. I was like, I know they're up to like 8 and like there's a 9th one coming out. And granted, I mean, if you like fast cars and explosions and Vin Diesel and whatnot, I mean, The Rock now is I think a big part of it and whatnot. And hey, I mean, it's a great summer popcorn type of movie. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying I lost interest.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you lose that combination, that they obviously are successful for a reason. And when you have Mario needs his Luigi, Steve needs his Spencer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's actually a funny story that there was one time we were in college, and do you remember this? Somebody that came on like, "Is Steven Spencer here?"
Right.
And they're like, "Well, I'm Steve, and Spencer's at class or something." They're like, "No, I'm looking for Steven Spencer." I'm like, "That's not one person, Steve and Spencer."
Not Steven
and like
Spencer.
we had been Steven Spencer, yeah, and we had become one. But when you have a combination, when you have a chemistry, Lethal Weapon is another great one.
The Star Trek movies, like if you didn't have like Kirk and Spock and Bones together, and like you did like a Star Trek movie with like the original cast, and like, hey, all we've got is Scotty, Sulu, and Uhura. I mean, yeah, that's not going to work. I mean,
not the same.
You got to have Spock, you got to have Kirk, you got to have Bones, you'd have to.
Okay, so here's a great example of this. So Speed. The first Speed, Keanu Reeves,
Sandra Bullock,
Sandra Bullock, and who's the bad guy?
Dennis Hopper. By the way,
Dennis Hopper.
I think I saw that movie my freshman year in high school probably like a good 80 or 90 times, because every single party we went to every weekend, that was like always one of the movies like, hey, we rented Speed, and then they'd put it in. I'm like, yeah, I'm taller, I got it. Like, I know how this ends. Every weekend.
Well, Speed 2, you remember it was with the boat instead of the bus.
I don't know that I ever saw that movie.
It was horrible. It was Sandra Bullock was still there. She was coming off, I think, Miss Congeniality 1 or maybe The Net.
But Keanu Reeves was absent, right?
He was deep in the Matrix. He was lost in the Matrix.
Good for him.
Yeah. Or maybe on a bogus adventure. I don't know.
Totally.
But anyway, yeah, you lose a key ingredient and the cake does not rise.
That is true. Another thing like you can't do is like you have to keep story elements the same. Like, right? Like if let's say you were doing a sequel to Star Wars and it's like Empire Strikes Back and it's like, oh hey, all of a sudden we're Luke learned how to use a lightsaber a little bit in the first one, and he flies an X-Wing to destroy the Death Star, but now we're going to take his X-Wing away. We're going to take his lightsaber away. Or like Indiana Jones, like, hey, you got used to him with the fedora and the whip. Yeah, guess what? Now he's, fedora and whipless. I mean, it's kind of like Kiss when they took their makeup off. Nobody cared.
Exactly.
I'm just
nice reference.
I know. I was made for loving you, baby. Anyway, that gets in my head. I'm a gone.
God gave rock and roll to you.
Right. No, but you know what I'm saying? Like, Rambo isn't Rambo without like a bow and arrow or
or a Bowie knife
or a Bowie knife or like I don't know, like homemade like traps and you can't take certain things away. Like Han Solo without the vest and the Millennium Falcon. He's
the blaster.
He's just a guy in a pair of slacks and a white shirt coming home from like doing spreadsheets all day at the office.
That's right. John McClane. He had to have his key phrase, the yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah, right. Like if he didn't say that like 8 times in every movie. Right? It's just another beat cop from New York.
That's right.
Yeah. Any
dime a dozen.
Right. Any sequel that like strips away like kind of core elements of like an original character or like kind of like, the main story that like helped thrust them forward. Dude, that kills it for me. I can't stand when I go see a movie that does that.
Yep. So another thing that I think is a pitfall of many sequels is that they try to reinvent the wheel, right?
Oh yeah.
So you have a really good thing going, and then suddenly, we talked about this earlier with Highlander, the second movie like has nothing to do with the first film.
The first movie, you get this great kind of plot of, there's these immortal beings, and the only way to kill another immortal being is you have to sever his head from his body. And at the end, everyone's gonna kind of, work their way down to like an elimination tournament, and there can only be one at the end. And then Highlander 2 is like, hey, by the way, all these immortals are actually aliens from another planet that were transported here.
Right.
And we're going to go back into time and tell about this future planet and how we shipped them. Oh my, that was so painful. You can't like completely go back and like destroy the story that came before to reinvent the wheel to like tell your new version.
One of the other ones that always comes to mind as well, and I know that you don't particularly like the horror genre, but
Right.
But John Carpenter's Halloween, a fantastic, one of my favorite horror films ever. Michael Myers,
Cricket, you're on your own,
exactly.
buddy.
No. So Michael Myers, murderer, comes back, tries to he kills his family. I think he tries to come back and kill Jamie Lee Curtis, who's his sister. The second one, he escapes from, Loomis, psychiatric ward and goes on another killing spree in this small town in Illinois. And then the third one has no mention at all of Michael Myers.
Wow.
It has to do with this company that makes these Halloween masks, and when the kids put on these Halloween masks, they suck onto their face and they become like these monsters, right?
What?
Like the story had nothing at all to do with a serial killer, mass murderer, Michael Myers. Nothing. I'm like, why did they even name it Halloween 3? So that's one where
Wow.
I mean, totally went off the grid, off the radar, off the rails. So.
As you were talking about Michael Myers, I was thinking, a sequel has to have a good villain. So,
oh yeah,
I mean, whatever drove the action in the first movie, your sequel has to have a very strong villain or a very strong plot device that like actually makes the protagonist like have to work for something or overcome something. And it has to be something like you care about. So like going back to like Empire Strikes Back, right? Darth Vader's in the first movie. But if you remember, Darth Vader wasn't like the head of the military. He was the Emperor's right-hand man, but Grand Moff Tarkin was the actual like leader of the military. And then when you step into Empire, now Vader's assumed the role of the head of the military, and like Vader, to me, Vader's actually scarier in the second film than in the first film because like his story and his plot, the plot around him develops more and the character's fleshed out more, and like you just like the whole thing with he's baiting a trap for Luke Skywalker and he's willing to like test it on Han Solo. He just doesn't care about some low-level criminal that owes a debt to Jabba the Hutt, and he's getting bounty hunters, and he's sending out probe droids across the entire galaxy looking for Luke. Like, he's not going to be stopped. He's going to find Luke Skywalker, and nothing's going to get in his way. And so, like, he's a very believable, strong villain, and you have to have that. I mean, you think about like The Dark Knight, right? Heath Ledger's Joker. I mean,
goodness.
I mean, that portrayal of Joker is probably going to go down hands down as the best Joker ever.
Absolutely.
I mean, Cesar Romero on the 1966 show. I mean, he was pretty good.
He was pretty good,
Right?
yeah.
But Heath Ledger's Joker, like, he was the antithesis of Batman. Like, it was perfect. Like, that character drove that story.
Absolutely.
You have to have that, right? But like Hans Gruber, you were talking about Die Hard, right?
Oh yeah. You can never have another Hans Gruber.
Right? I mean,
oh man, don't kill me, man.
Yeah. Oh, please. Oh, I love that. But
and Karate Kid, you'll never have another Johnny.
Right.
Kill him, Johnny, put him in a body bag.
Yeah, you remember the sequel to that, Karate Kid 2? It was like, hey, we're over here and we've got this guy who thinks...
This Asian dude that breaks ice.
And you kind of think that he kind of stole your girl thing, and you got to have the little drums that you... as you spin them, and then, you got the double-fisted punching. Okay, I actually really like Karate Kid 2.
I actually really liked Karate Kid 2 as you're talking about. I'm like, dang, that was a good movie. Dude, I had a great soundtrack. I am the man who will fight
for your honor. Yeah. Little Peter Cetera.
It's so funny. We're all trying to like lambast, and we're like, we actually really liked it. You're pathetic.
That's awesome. But
and then isn't there like a hurricane or something? He's got to like break that big board. That Mr. Miyagi's like nemesis.
Sakosan!
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
he's got to go out there and like break the big board of his rival that like took over like the entire island and
when he left,
build it all. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one. We're such suckers.
But I guess getting back to the real point though is like if you have a sequel and the villain isn't good, doesn't drive the action, like it really does just flop. I mean, if you think back to some of like the, like we talked about Highlander 2, being like a really bad sequel. Do you remember the villain of Highlander 2?
Absolutely not.
Me neither. And I've seen that movie probably a couple times because I loved the first one so much. Gosh, okay, here's a perfect example. Superman 2, General Zod is an amazing villain.
Oh,
Is an amazing villain. And that obviously was set up at the very beginning of the first movie. Do you remember the villain in Superman 3?
Is that the sun guy?
No, that's actually Superman 4.
Oh no, Richard Pryor.
Yeah, Richard Pryor helps build that like computer that's gonna like take on Superman. Yes, but you had to think about it. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not that great of a villain. It's like,
that's right.
Hey, we're these criminals and we want to build a computer to beat Superman.
Though it is funny when Richard Pryor skis off the top of that building and like lands in the street. That's pretty funny.
So I think if you're gonna do a sequel, you've gotta take a lot of things into consideration. I really think, Steve, writing a sequel has got to be a hard thing to do. Like you got to thread that needle.
I'm just gonna stay home.
we'll write something for TV instead, is what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
I mean, because you think about it. I mean, the only reason a sequel ever gets made is what? Money, right? That's the reason why we got Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters made so much money, they hurried up and got a script ready, and they got us into, taking ooze and the, Statue of Liberty and using the NES, the Advantage controller and, walking it around and singing happy music and, making everyone feel good. That story's really kind of a rough, weak story. But everyone wanted another Ghostbusters movie so bad because the original was so good. So you get a sequel that gets greenlit, and that's why they rush it out there. And in some things, like we talked about Fast and Furious, like I don't even know like how good the stories get in some of those later ones, but they still keep making those movies because they make money.
Oh. Are they literally on like 9?
I think 9's the next one. I think they're saying it may be the end. But I mean,
that's just crazy, right?
Well, here's the thing: like those movies.
How much more story do you have to tell?
It doesn't matter. That's at this point with them.
I know.
It's like the Michael Bay Transformer movies. I saw the first one. I think I saw the second one, and I was done. I don't know the stories there, but it's about big robots that are from outer space, or maybe they're from here all the time. Who really knows? But
whereas
fight.
you can see a Lord of the Rings though, and each one of those movies is a standalone like phenomenal film, right?
Absolutely.
And they need to be told. It's a story that needs to be told, and it needed to be drawn out over 3 films, And
I think that also, though, like those are movies that are drawn from a book, right? So there's like a source material versus like, hey, we created a movie based on a toy line.
About fast cars.
Right. Yeah. We made a movie based on a toy line, and, we don't really care what it's about because it's going to do 200 to 300 million here. And, car racing is huge in China, so it's going to make $1 billion over there. We'll make our money on the back end, on the worldwide distribution. I mean, they don't really care. Now, I'll tell you what, though, Thundercats movie comes out, something like that happens. I'll probably drop a good $12 to see a kind of a crappy story just because of Thundercats, because I love it.
An artist's rendition of Chitara in real life. Come on.
Oh, yes. Okay, Steve, so let me ask you this then. Talking about sequels, what, like, if you're going to say, like, what's a sequel, like, you just love, like, it doesn't matter if it's, like, good or bad, or if it's, like, I don't know, like, it improves on the characters, from the previous ones, or it's just a retread, like, what's just a movie you just love just because?
Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom.
Really?
I freaking love it. Yeah, I didn't really care for Raiders of the Lost Ark as much, and I love Temple of Doom.
Surprise me, man, because I love Raiders. I love Raiders. It's probably the best of the indie movies, in my opinion. But I couldn't. I never liked Temple of Doom, and let's be honest, people. I'm a scaredy cat. I do not like scary movies. And like the scene where like they're eating like the monkey brains out of the skulls.
That's the best. Chilled monkey brains. Oh my gosh, that's
that
awesome.
Always freaked me out as a kid.
Or the part with the bugs when he's got to put his hand in that thing and all the things are crawling all over.
You're still making me not want to watch it.
It has that classic Indiana Jones like coal cart scene where they're racing through on the rails. Like, I don't know, and I don't think it has all the thematic elements that we talked about tonight, but I just love that. I loved it. I grew up on it, loved it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no judging. I didn't care for it much, but I definitely can see how you may just have a love and an affinity for it. Mine actually is Karate Kid 2.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Judge you. Well, I'm judging you.
Just because as I was trying to think about this, like as we're just talking, it's like,
I am the man.
I loved the original, and then they leave and they go back to Mr. Miyagi's, home village and his island, and like you had this, like it was a different story, but like it really didn't improve upon the characters, and like some of the things like it should, but like that whole scene at the end where like he's kind of like courting that girl, and then like he kind of gets in trouble with the local toughs, and then
the local
next thing you know, everyone's out there and he's in that little middle ramp, and
don't they have to like throw the bridges down? I was
just gonna say that they throw the bridges into the water, and they're like this isn't. They're like, Daniel-san, this isn't for points in a tournament. This is to the death. And so they're out there and with the little things,
yeah,
and he's double fisted punching him. And at the end, he's like, he beats him down. He's like, live or die, man. And he goes, die. He goes, wrong answer. Honk, and honks his nose.
Oh yeah, he honks his nose. Wow.
So once again, like it's not.
So everything, all the points that we talked about, like totally blows that out of the water.
I'm just saying, like you have a guilty pleasure sequel. Yours is Temple of Doom. Mine is Karate Kid 2.
No, I gotta say, like my real guilty pleasure, because I've actually been thinking about this because I knew that you were gonna ask. Naked Gun 2.5.
Oh yes.
Is this some kind of bust? Well, yes, it's quite impressive, but that's not why we're here. Like, friggin' Leslie Nielsen's, like, delivery, like, I'm sure we can handle this like the mature adults that we are, Mr. Poopy Pants. Those movies, like, were, like, pure slapstick bliss in my childhood, and the second one was, like, just as funny as the first. O.J. Simpson was in there. He gets caught into the front of the car, and they drive around with him underneath of it.
That would be really hard to go back and watch now, though.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
OJ. Yeah, that would be weird. But the comedy,
weird.
I mean, I'm thinking it would hold up like an Airplane would or an Animal House. But those were some of like the foundational like stones of my like comedic bone.
Right.
So
okay, so like, what would you say then would be like your favorite sequel that like enriches on characters and like builds on the first movie, but like doesn't rehash the first movie?
I would have to go back to what I mentioned earlier, Godfather 2. I think it was. I mean, Godfather is obviously it was a huge film. The genre. I mean, it is and still is the quintessential mobster movie. But I think Godfather 2 stands not in front of it, but shoulder to shoulder with Godfather, and is the perfect dovetail into the story. It further propels Corleone. You see all these internal struggles he has with family and trying to run the. Yeah, exactly.
You betrayed me, Fredo.
Exactly.
Oh gosh, I love that scene.
Oh yeah. So I love Godfather 2. That's my.
So that's a great pick, by the way. Like I love that. You're knocking it out of the park. For me, if I'm going to pick a movie where like it enriches upon and builds upon the first one and doesn't rehash it and tells a different story and like it improves, for me it's Superman 2. Like I'm going to go back because Superman 2, you take this little small element from the first movie with the Phantom Zone and General Zod, and that becomes the story in the second one, but like Clark Kent decides like he's going to hang up the cape and the tights because he wants to live a normal life with Lois. And so like you have this whole different change in story, and so it's different. It's not just like the normal kind of thing that happened before, but it builds upon the character of who Clark Kent is and who Superman is, and like the kind of the moral dilemma he goes through. Now, granted, he's not, normal Clark Kent for very long. It's kind of short-lived, and then General Zod comes and he arrives, and Clark has to become Superman again. But like it takes like the superhero movie, and it like I feel like that movie had like more gravitas, acting in it than the original did.
No, I think that's a great pick as well, and to see his moral dilemma of wanting to kind of, like you said, live a normal life and forego the calling that he ultimately has to pick up again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. I love it. Okay, sequel that's better than the original. This is a harder thing, I think, for a lot of people because most sequels don't get anywhere near the original. But I will argue that there's a handful that are better than the original. So what would you think, in your opinion, is a sequel that's better than an original?
I mean, I could easily toss out Empire Strikes Back, but that's kind of I feel like that's kind of
a gimme.
Easy, yeah, it's kind of a gimme. I have to think about. Why don't you go and I'll think about it.
So I agree. Like Empire Strikes Back definitely I think is better than A New Hope. But I agree. Like that kind of does seem like a gimme, Steve. So like I'm not gonna go with that. If I'm gonna pick a movie that I think is better than the original, I'm gonna go with a Star Trek movie actually, and I'm gonna say Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. It's definitely a better movie than the Star Trek the Motion Picture. It changed so many things. Like Star Trek the Motion Picture still had this kind of feeling of like the original series where it's like this big kind of utopian, Federation's like this utopian ideal, and they just kind of go and do their own little things. But like Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, like Nicholas Meyer, who wrote and co-wrote and directed it, like brought in more of the military kind of feel, which ended up dominating how Star Trek felt for the, going forward. It has this great heavy story between Spock and Kirk and kind of like their interaction as friends, and like Spock's, trying to understand humanity and the nature of friendship. And at the very end, you have this amazing scene where the two are separated by glass after Spock has, tried to, has stopped the reactor core from going, and he knows he's going to die. And there's that great scene between the two of them. You've got Kirk, who's facing an old nemesis that he never expected to see again, who is now proving to be, just a deadly adversary. But like the whole thing is like a fun movie. Like it's action, it's fast paced compared to like the motion picture. And it by far is the high watermark of all Star Trek movies. I mean, every Star Trek movie since is always compared to The Wrath of Khan. No one talks about comparing Star Trek movies to the Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Right.
So Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, in my opinion, is a much better movie than the original, and it happens to be the best movie out of all of the Star Trek movies.
That is solid. That is solid. I still have not come up with one. One that I wouldn't say is as good as the original, but very close to, and this is just my own personal, and you'll probably disagree. I really liked Back to the Future 2. And I wouldn't say that, I mean, the original was so different and so original that I wouldn't say that it's better than, but it is a great, maybe it's just my love of hoverboards. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, but
yeah,
I don't know.
For me, I'll disagree. And you're right. I don't think it's better than the original. I definitely think there's some storytelling issues in the second movie, but the second movie's a lot of fun. Like, it's just a fun movie.
It is.
I'll tell you another movie, and maybe this will be yours. And I don't want to give away too many because I think that's kind of where I want to go maybe this week with Question of the Week. But like,
yeah,
what about like The Dark Knight versus like Batman Begins?
Yeah,
Was Dark Knight better with Heath Ledger's Joker? Was that a better film than Batman Begins?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, other than but I think that the villain. It's so hard because it's so off-weighted by just Heath Ledger's like unbelievable, irreplicatable performance as the Joker. But I think that the Batman Begins is was just so I don't know, revolutionary. It's just so different than what we'd seen before with any other Batman renditions. That when that came out, that hit you like a ton of bricks. So I don't know. I might have to punt on this one.
Okay. So to sum it up, though, would you agree that we can both say that Karate Kid 2 is the best sequel ever?
Is there a Mortal Kombat 2 maybe I could throw into the mix?
Actually, there was a second Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh my gosh.
I never saw it, I promise you.
They didn't have that Bridget girl come back, did they?
No clue. I can go to IMDb later if I really cared, but I'm not going to. I'm just telling you now. It's not going to happen. Okay, so let's make that the question of the week. What sequel is better than the original? Tell us why you think your sequel that you're going to choose is better than the original. Please, you can get to us on Twitter at Fort of Nerd, email fortofnerd@gmail.com, or facebook.com/fortofnerd. I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because I think this is a topic that there's going to be many different opinions on and reasons why, and I want to hear your reasons. Which sequel is better than the original? And Steve will come up with something by next week, and we'll actually have to pin him to the wall on something.
There you go.
So anyway, Steve, great to be with you once again. I'm so happy we're doing this every week. It's so much fun. I just love it.
Absolutely. It's good, and hopefully our sequels are just as good as the original.
Right.
We're 24 deep, so you tell us.
So you're saying that our podcast is now like the Fast and Furious of podcasts?
That's right. Paul Walker, rest in peace.
All right, guys. Well, for all of us at the Fortress of Nerditude, may the Force be with you. Always.
Tonight it's very clear as we're both lying here. There's so many things I want to say. I will always love you. I would never